This is the Erasing Shame podcast. Honest talk for healthy living, growing, and thriving.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Erasing Shame, Honest Talk for Healthy Living. Today we're going to do an episode of Seen, which is an Erasing Shame podcast, where we talk about shame and how it impacts our community as Asian Americans. We're going to be reviewing such topics as big as Hollywood representation and as personal as postpartum depression. So today is the last episode of season 1 of Seen, and I'm very excited here today to talk to my friend Shelia Sutton.
Hi.
And so we're going to be talking about shame resilience in the classroom.
Yes, we are.
So Shelia has been teaching English in the public school system for 30 years. She's taught grades 6 through 12. She's also a licensed marriage and family therapist in part-time private practice in Pasadena, California. She's completed her undergraduate studies at the University of Texas at Austin, and she also holds 2 master's degrees, one in English and one in psychology.
Yeah.
So thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me. This is awesome.
So Shelia, wow, it's such an honor to have you. You recently went to Texas and you worked a little bit with Brené Brown.
I did.
And I would love to hear, I think our listeners would love to hear how you got connected to Brené and what exactly you did with her.
So I just get all emotional just like hearing that because I'm a big fan of Brené Brown. So I've been using Brené Brown's work in my classroom for many years. And a few years ago, I tweeted a photograph in my classroom. I had maybe 40 Twitter followers. And she replied and said, DM me. And I'm like, what's DM mean? So
I asked your students.
I
right?
asked my students and they're like, it means direct message. So I sent her a direct message and she sent me a class set of her book, her latest book at the time, Braving the Wilderness. Mm-hmm. And so I've been teaching that book for a couple years now. And then in May, she sent me a direct message and asked me to come to Texas to be part of a group of 4 teachers that she hand-selected to write integration plans for her Daring Classrooms work. And that site just went live yesterday, so it's super exciting. It has a great deal of lesson plans. Well, we didn't call them lesson plans. We called them integration plans for K through 5 and then for 6 through 12.
Very cool. So were you in charge of the 6 through 12?
Erin Parker, who is in Indianapolis, LaPorte, Indiana. She and I wrote the lesson plans for the 6 through 12. She's a high school teacher there. And then Lanisha Tab and Esther Kwok wrote the ones for K through 5.
Very cool.
Yeah, it was really cool. And it was great to meet them and work with them. They're also awesome, wonderful teachers.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what values from Daring Greatly and from Brené Brown's research in shame resilience were you hoping to integrate in the curriculum?
Well, so she, the 4 pillars of courage that she works with are, vulnerability, rumbling with vulnerability. So we wrote lessons about that and how to use that in the classroom and introduce that in the classroom. So the topics under that one would be things like, how do you teach kids courage? And what does it mean to be courageous in the classroom? When you're afraid, how do you do things that are risky? That kind of thing. And then we also wrote lessons on dealing with shame and shame shields, which is really important. Her and the way that she defines shame shields is that there are 3. One is to move away. So when you feel shame, get the heck out of there, right? Or move toward when you're feeling shame. And in that one, you actually people please. So just to avoid your own feelings of shame, then you over the top people please, and then moving against, which is when you use your own shame to shame other people. And a lot of these things happen in classrooms all the time. And so having kids go through and look at how shame impacts them and what it feels like and begin to recognize the triggers that they have in their own body and how to intervene on their own behalf is really important. Those are some important lessons that we came up with. And then, clarity of values. Like, I think so often we have way too many values, and Brené really recommends that we choose 2 off the list. And there's hundreds of values, and you really have to work at narrowing it down. So what I have my students do is they choose 2 individually, and we talk about why that's important to them, and then we choose 2 as a class. And then the question becomes, what are the actionable things? How do we make those values actionable? So if one of my values is making a difference, so that's nice. But what does it mean every day to get up and make a difference, right? So for me, making a difference in my own life would be like, I practice self-care. I go to bed early. I try to eat fewer carbs, that kind of stuff. And then, if I practice self-care and make a difference in my own life, then I'm in a better position to make a difference in other people's lives as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
may I ask, what's your other one?
My other one is faith.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then the question in the classroom is whatever we choose as our two, everything is evaluated based on, does this serve our values?
Mm-hmm.
Does it serve the work that we're doing in here?
Mm-hmm.
So anything I do during the day, if I ask myself, does this serve my two values? If the answer is no, then it's not really me being genuine.
I love that.
Right?
Yeah.
And it just simplifies everything.
Yeah.
So it's hard to narrow it down though.
Yeah. I think what I like about that is that it takes some level of self-awareness in order to create those values. And I think a lot of times when we're talking about, particularly in this podcast,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of looking past the shame that, our families, our communities put on us. And sometimes we're given those values rather than being able to choose them.
Right.
So I think that the idea of choice is so important.
Right.
And you work with, you work in San Gabriel Valley,
Mm-hmm.
where there's a lot of Asian American families,
Right.
and Asian families.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you see any themes, even in the population you work with or any of the students, when it comes to shame.
Well, I do. So about 70% of our student body are Asians. And what I find is that the shame really comes in dealing with their identity. So their identity is often attached to performance. And when the performance doesn't match the expectation, there's a lot of shame as a result. Like I'm bad, or I'm not good enough, or I'm defective and, damaged in some way. And so having them not overly identify with performance, but actually recognizing that they're worthy of love and belonging just where they are is a huge aha moment for them. They're like, what? And so we do a lot of work around that as well.
That's so cool. And you're an English teacher, right?
I do. I teach English.
And then you also teach one more?
I teach conflict resolution as well.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
How does that work out with high schoolers?
The conflict resolution class is a very popular class. And so, it works out really well. So I would actually really like to change the name to conflict mediation rather than resolution. But really what we do is we work on resiliency skills, like what it means to be a resilient person. And then we work on how to be genuine, authentic, and keep problems. So in a relationship, if I got mad at you, if you, I don't know, dented my car or something, if the problem that you're causing me, the dented car, is bigger than who you are to me, then we're not going to be able to resolve it. But if I'm like, oh, she's Eunice, she's my best friend, like we have history together, of course we're going to figure this out, then I know that the relationship is bigger than the problem and my relational circuits are on. And so in conflict resolution, we work on how do we keep relationships bigger than problems.
I love that.
Right?
And it links to the work that you do with shame too, because when we're too ashamed, we can't move towards.
Right.
And then the other person becomes the problem rather than being the person that you know.
Right.
And then it ends up with both people shaming themselves, or at least one person.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is when the person's the problem, then there is no way to work toward resolution until the relationship becomes more important than the problem that's in play. Because if the focus is on, our relationship is bigger than this problem and together we're going to figure it out, then you can move forward from there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's fun.
And you do this with high schoolers.
I do.
I feel like you should do this with like adults, like full-fledged adults.
Well, I am going to be presenting the Daring Classrooms material to our district on Wednesday. So I'm really happy about that. So we go back to school this week. And on Wednesday we have a professional development day and I'll be presenting this material. So I'm very excited.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Wow. So I'm still just absorbing this idea of the person and the relationship and shame and stuff like that. And so you and I have talked a little bit about shame as a whole, Brené Brown, and also this podcast. And I'm just curious because we've talked about how erasing shame, it's a good title, it's snappy, but there's a lot about, Brené Brown also talks about shame resilience. And I'm wondering if you could, you've talked about the shame shield. I'm wondering if you could define that a little bit more.
Okay, so what Brené Brown would say is that all of us experience shame. And it's not about getting rid of shame. It's actually about recognizing and identifying when you have shame triggers. So, for example, for me, my hands start sweating. I feel like I'm being swallowed up. Like I cower. I want the floor to open up underneath me. I just want to disappear. And if we can catch ourselves in the moment that we're feeling like I am bad, because she differentiates between shame and guilt, and she'll say I am bad versus I did something bad. And the resiliency part comes in recognizing, oh, I'm in shame. I'm in the shame storm, and that the way to get out of it is I need to connect with somebody who's earned the right to hear my story. So, for example, she has this square squad thing where you put the names of 4 people that you can trust, and they're the people who tell you the truth, who are honest, or whatever. So she would say that when she's in a shame storm, she doesn't text, she doesn't email, she doesn't phone call, she doesn't respond to anything until she can get back to her genuine self or get regulated. So sometimes what that means is, thank you so much. Like, I'm going to go now. Like if it's a relational thing. And then she goes home and she'll connect with someone who's earned the right to hear her story, who helps her get back to herself. And so the more shame resilient we are, and the way we're able to intervene in our own shame storms, then we don't offload that hurt to other people.
And spread the shame.
Essentially, yeah. Right. So resilience is about not spreading the shame. It's about, finding a safe space to get back to a sense of I'm worthy of love and belonging just like I am. Because typically shame comes from somebody saying something or doing something that makes you feel like I'm bad or I'm wrong, right? Something's wrong with me. And when we're in that space, we lose sight of the actual truth that we're all worthy of love and belonging, just like we are. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, like, particularly in the Asian American culture that you're familiar with, and there is a lot of like having to save face, and not a lot of sitting in your shame or trying to figure it out with another person.
Right.
And so it sounds like that even that shame resiliency has to do with repairing shame in relationship to somebody else.
Yes.
And it actually kind of reminds me of your book, which is Joy Starts Here, from you wrote years ago, right? And just that the joy is sparked between 2 people,
right? And
this is kind of similar, and I'm seeing that there's patterns here of how shame is reconciled in relationship, just like how joy is created in a relationship,
right? Yeah. So joy in our book, Joy Starts Here, we really looked at the neuroscience behind joy, and that joy is relational. So you can do happiness alone. Like, I'm happy with this cup of coffee, or this cup of coffee makes me happy. But relational joy has to be in the context of being with somebody. It just means being glad to be together. And really what it means is being glad to be with someone when they're in a big emotion as well. So like, if you're really mad at me right now, how could I be glad to be with you if you're really mad? And what the question that we ask is, what would it be like me to do, living from the heart that, that I was created with, if I weren't so mad right now? And then to do that, and to act from your true authentic self rather than the angry big emotion. Yeah. So being glad to be together when somebody's sad without trying to fix it. And in the synchronization that comes with that, if I'm happy to be with you and you're mad, it actually helps you regulate faster. If I'm trying to stop you from being mad or get away from you while you're mad, or I'll come back later when you're not mad, then it takes longer to self-regulate. Yeah.
So you've been really doing this work for more than just the summer. You've been doing this work for years.
Yeah. I've been following Brené's work since 2010. So she has just given me a language and a voice for so much of what I was doing, and then a way to make it more palatable for students. And, I don't know if we have time, but one of the things is like just talking about the braving acronym. She has this anatomy of trust. And in classrooms, trust can be really hard to build. But whenever you have this acronym, which is braving, boundaries, reliability, accountability, vault, integrity, non-judgment, and generosity, and we really work through each one of those terms, and that becomes how we are in class. So there's no rules, there's no norms, like all that gets thrown out the window, and it's sort of like boundaries, what's okay and what's not okay. So if a kid's talking while I'm talking, I'll just look at them and say boundary, and then I keep going, and they self-correct. Or if a kid is tardy, and I just say, hey, looks like you're not being reliable. In other words, you've agreed to show up on time every day, and reliability is doing what we say we'll do over and over and over again. And what's been so great about using this acronym with kids is that oftentimes I'll walk by students and they'll be like, is that your story to tell? Which is the vault, right? So like, we can't tell other people's stories,
I love that.
And then kids will say to me, Miss Sutton, were you being generous in your assumptions about me? And I'm like, oh, yeah, no. So, it just gives us a language to deal with these really difficult issues. Yeah.
And I think that's so important too, because you're working with, I know they're high schoolers, but they're kids, and we need to expect that they can understand and embody these concepts too, not just adults, but that kids can.
Yeah.
They can really understand boundaries involved.
So many of my kids are like, Miss Sutton, my parents need this, or my family needs this, or, so I just believe that, we're creating leaders in the next generation. And so, hopefully giving them this language makes it, and especially when there's a common language in the classroom, then they can have difficult conversations using common language, right? So, yeah.
I think you told me about the vault a while ago, and I was like, I feel like that is something that's often missing, particularly in a lot of collectivist communities where it's like, well, it's all our stories. It's a collective identity. And then this idea of kind of holding the dignity of someone else's story is forgotten in this larger hope to share stories. And I think you and I are both therapists as well. And that's what we do, is we hold people's stories and hold them with dignity so that they can feel released from some of the shame that they experience.
Right. And I think that, the thing about story is that it really is important, but, people need to know that they're sharing their stories with people who've earned the right to hear their story. And Brené would say something like, so maybe you tell me something and I hold it in confidence, right? But then the next time you see me, I'm talking about somebody else, and you'll be like, well, maybe she's holding my thing in confidence, but she's definitely not holding that other person's story in confidence. And so that would erode the trust that we have. And I would be like, wait a minute, I keep all your stuff private. And you're like, well, yeah, but you come in and you tell me about other people. And when we're talking about other people, it's a way to hotwire connection in a bad way, right? So like if we hate the same people, or if we talk about the same people, it hotwires this connection.
It's a shortcut.
It's a shortcut, and it's not real connection. It's a pseudo connection. It's a fake connection. Yeah. But my kids have developed this thing where they go, Miss Sutton, you got to keep this in the vault. Like they do this V thing. And
so they make that up?
Yeah. Isn't that awesome?
That's awesome.
So like they'll come into my desk and like, we're going to keep this in the vault, right, Miss Sutton? And I'm like, yeah, as long as, it meets I don't have to, it's not a mandated reporter thing.
Yeah.
So,
That's, I feel that too sometimes with friends or acquaintances when they're like, oh, did you hear? Then even though I haven't shared, or even if I have shared something personal, but I wonder if, are they also analyzing my relationships like that? Or are they also conceptualizing me in a certain way? And it makes me feel less safe. And so it makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And that's something that I feel like happens a lot, like in families, it's like, oh, did you hear about your auntie or uncle or things like that? And it's so normal that we forget that, oh, these are actually people we're talking about. And it can be damaging.
Yeah. And even good news, right? So like one of my nieces, had some good news and she told me, and normally I would just be like, go share that news, right? Because it's good news. But recently I was just like, hey, so thanks for sharing your good news. Are you going to like tell the rest of the family, or like, is this something that's shareable? Like, is it okay? Whatever. And I think it was a really growing edge for our family to be like, I'm not going to share your good news. It's your story to tell. Because sometimes we think that just it's good news so we can share it, and that's actually not true either, because you're taking away somebody's, they get to share their good news. There's nothing worse than having good news and they're like, oh, I already know. Like, wait, I wanted to share that, right? So, yeah.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. And I wouldn't have thought about it either, having not done this. Well, we've all done it. Yeah. And, just the fact that I slowed down enough to write back and say, this was great news. Thank you for sharing. Like, have you shared with everyone else yet?
And I think that's a great idea. Like, or just that brings up in my mind right now, like when you bring this to a family, for example, then you can actually have shame resilience within the family. Yeah. And you're sharing this with your high schoolers, who hopefully can go on to become leaders of their family and can care for and love the people in their lives. Right. And you're introducing these concepts to them.
Yeah. It's fun.
Yeah. It's really cool. Yeah. Where can we find these?
So if you want to learn about Daring Classrooms, you can go to BrenéBrown.com, or you can just Google Daring Classrooms. The hub went live yesterday, and there are integration plans there that have been uploaded, and you can download, print. All the resources for educators are free. It's free to anyone. And then you can find me at She Teaches School on Instagram, or Shelia D. Sutton at Twitter.
Yeah, we can put that in the notes too. So,
yeah. And I'm also starting a new SheTeachesSchool.com blog. It's not live yet, but I'm going to be keeping a diary of our Daring Classroom this year. So kind of looking at how we implement everything on the Daring Classroom's website hub in our classroom, the real life, day in, day out. And I'm going to have my students help me do that.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much for coming. This is
you.
a long time coming, and
I know.
I'm so glad you're able to be on this. On this podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I love her. Thanks, Shelia.
Thank you for being a part of Erasing Shame. Please rate and review on iTunes, subscribe on YouTube, and like on Facebook. Share with your friends and followers. Get all the details at erasingshame.com.